And welcome back. We have with us on set from the Belize Bureau of Standards, we have Jose Trejo, the director, and we have Dr. Miguel Figueroa, who is the Belize Agricultural Health Authority food safety personnel, and Dr. Natalie Gibson, who is also from BAHA. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So we're having a double celebration,
Yes,
or observance, of both World Food Safety Day and Accreditation Day. Could you separate them for me and tell us what is World Food Safety, what does it include, and why we celebrate it, as well as Accreditation Day?
All right, let me start by saying that this year will be the first time we will be celebrating World Food Safety Day. Actually, it started 3 years ago, this wanting to have this World Food Safety Day. And it was proposed on one of the Codex Alimentarius Commission sessions that we have normally the sessions are held in Rome or on Geneva. And so the delegate of Costa Rica proposed that in one of those sessions. And of course, when all the countries approved, they said, yes, of course, it's a good idea. And so from then, it had to go to the FAO for them to endorse it. And after FAO, we went to WHO, World Health Organization. They also endorsed it. And finally, last year in December, the United Nations, the General Assembly, approved it and gave the final vetting. And they said, yes, 7th of June we'll be celebrating World Food Safety Day. So from now on, every 7th of June, we'll be celebrating World Food Safety Day.
But why is that important? I mean, a bunch of people sat down and decided to stamp something and say
well, there's a lot of concern with regards to food safety. Let's say, for example, World Health Organization, they have reported that 1 out of 10 persons will get sick from contaminated food.
I was one of that.
That's about 600 million people all over the world will get sick due to from foodborne disease. And out of that, you have about 420,000 will die as a result of that. And they also reported that children under 5 years are more susceptible, right? And they will, and so they have reported that 125,000 children under 5 years they die every year because of eating contaminated food. And so that's the importance of food, and we have to start to give more awareness to that.
I want to come back to that, but I want to understand too a bit about Accreditation Day and how this links together, right?
Okay, well, thank you very much. World Accreditation Day is celebrated on June 9th of every year. As a matter of fact, last year we were here talking about the accomplishment of BAHA, because BAHA is now an accredited institution, and Doc will talk about that. But the importance of the theme this year is adding value to supply chains. And while it speaks about products and services, we're tying it up mainly here because of the issue of food safety and trying to bring the teams together. Because the global value chain system is very complex now. You're talking about processes and practices that it goes beyond your national territory in terms of food being prepared as an input, from the farm to the table. So something's being prepared maybe in Kenya or Brazil and so on. At the end of the day, everything comes into that supply chain. So the importance of accreditation is to ensure that whatever testing, whatever inspection, whatever calibration, whatever certification, those systems are intact to ensure that the supply chain in terms of food is safe, and that the laboratories that are actually doing these tests are laboratories that have competence, that have the capabilities to do certain tests, and that the laboratories have international recognition to be able to do those tests. So that's the main thing with why this is important, because of the complexity of the supply chain.
Yeah. This is such a real life example of how and why accreditation is important. Because when we talk about metrology or measuring and ensuring that things are giving you or being measured or tested in the proper way and the results are accurate, we want and need that so much when it comes to what we will be consuming. And so having the lab, as it was accredited last year, I think is such a great development. And I want to give Dr. Gibson the opportunity to talk about the rollout of the work at the lab itself and where you've seen the biggest impact.
So we're going on 1 year of having been accredited. And as Mr. Trejo mentioned, it's important. Our role comes in part, or I would say primarily, towards the end of the chain.
Yeah.
But we know that every part of the chain is important, and the weakest link in the chain, that's where you can have a contamination that will affect what we get to consume. So in terms of in the lab itself, it's more been, I would say, a change of culture where I've always heard people talk about quality culture, and we have to manage a system.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of things we were doing to ensure competence before, but now we actually have an international standard that we need to comply with.
Yeah.
So that's been, I would say we're growing in that culture.
Yeah.
In terms of we're able to prove the quality of every test that we do. We
Yeah.
can go back and look at the results, and anybody can come in and look at it, and we can show, we have all the traceability to show.
Yeah. So if you eat something that's contaminated and it's been through your lab, there's a direct link to how many were produced, or, I mean, you have all the information available. Traceability.
Well, I was talking about traceability in terms of our testing.
Okay.
But in terms of products that are being tested, we know that people can also contaminate products in the home. We have the role, everybody plays a role, the people who transport the food product.
Yeah.
So we're always looking to expand in terms of the scope of products that we do test.
Yeah.
In the past year, what is can you point us to something specific that has been of value that we didn't have a year ago that we do have now, and something that we can build on? What is the actual value of being accredited for a year? Not just to say we were accredited on a piece of paper, but practically what specifically can you point us to of that improvement?
Well, we have not, I would say in terms of trade, we are periodically evaluated by certain trading partners where we have to input that information of the status of our laboratory. And there's no answer that's not accredited. It's what stage are you at? So we're now, we actually were not evaluated last year. So it's the next time that we fill out that form, we'll be able to say we are now accredited.
Great.
Perhaps it's the producers more who get the benefit because they don't have to ship out samples for testing. They can do it right here. That would be one of the benefits?
Yes, definitely. Every accreditation has a scope. And so our focus was on salmonella, which is an important foodborne pathogen. And in terms of what we are doing now, well, our goal right now is 1, to maintain that accreditation, and then 2, to expand that accreditation. So our scope was microbiology. We want to expand the test methods that are within that scope.
Yeah.
We also want to expand beyond microbiology to include the chemistry lab. And I would be remiss not to mention that there is another BAHA lab that should be getting their accreditation assessment this year. That is the aquatic lab, which operates under the Animal Health Department of BAHA.
What's the difference between the biochemistry, you used 2 terms just now that completely lost me.
Oh, microbiology and chemistry.
Yes, what's the difference between the 2?
So in microbiology, we're looking for bacteria that can cause disease or certain indicator bacteria that might indicate that there's been a contamination. chemistry, you're looking for residues, additives, preservatives, making sure they're within levels that are allowed.
Yeah. So, coming back to the food safety issue, I think that this is something, food safety, while I think there's a general practice, we tend to be a little bit lax with it in this country. And it's not just about, no, because I have to be fair. They have health inspectors that go out. Ministry of Health has health inspectors that go out and educate at the very least. The information is available, but there's a lot of practice on the ground that perhaps not fulfilled. One of the things that I am continuously concerned about is when we think of the simple practice, which is number one step in food safety, hand washing.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's it. Proper hand washing.
Proper hand washing.
The proper technique for hand washing. We look at that gastrointestinal study that came out that showed that the primary bacteria that gets the majority of Belizeans sick, well, it comes from the bathroom, and it means that we're very dirty in our practices. So I'm just trying to use that as an example to show that we're being kind of complacent about an issue that can really take our life away, or the life of our loved ones, or your customers. How do we bring the focus into what your personal practices are, what the overall regulations dictate, and make it where food safety becomes an important issue for us?
Well, we definitely have challenges when it comes to food safety. I mean, it's the controls, right?
Yeah.
Even though government has they said BAHA is the competent authority for food safety, but it's still food safety cuts across 3 different ministries.
Yeah.
One is, of course, public health,
Yeah.
Bureau of Standards, BAHA, and PCB, even PCB, Pesticide Control Board.
Yeah.
Because they do register all the pesticides that are in use, and they provide a lot of training. So one of the challenges and then the coordination between all these ministries is a little bit lax, We don't have much proper coordination, and so we need to communicate more, I guess, and we need to be more, cooperate more, and last year, 2 years, we developed what we call a national food safety policy for Belize. And in that policy, it indicates who's responsible for what, because a lot of times we don't know exactly whose responsibility it is to do this or to do that.
Yeah.
Right? In that policy, we have specifically who is responsible for what area. For example, they're saying, well, BAHA will be responsible for the production area, farm level. Remember, food safety, the control, it starts from the farm to the table.
Yeah.
So all of these entities in the food chain, they play
the pesticides used in the farm.
Right, exactly, the inputs that is used in the farm. All of these the whole supply chain, everyone is responsible for that.
Yeah.
And thus we have the theme for this year in food safety is actually food safety, everyone's business. That's the theme for this year, because everyone has a role to play when it comes to food safety. Yeah. Normally when I have trainings or when I have meetings, I always say, look, it's not BAHA responsible for food safety. We provide guidance, we provide inspection, we provide testing. So it's all you guys that producing the food. You are producing the food to place at the market. So you guys have a responsibility for food safety. And that's an education process. You have to do education.
I want to get Jose in here, because you clearly had a reaction to that question. I don't know if it was the hand washing or the virus, but...
I was sick too late.
Helicobacter.
No, I think that when it comes to the manufacturing part, I mean, I think maybe 10 years ago, nobody was talking about hazard and analysis critical control points, which is really a system to ensure that you are taking into account any physical, chemical, and biological hazards in terms of your processing. I think that the challenge for us as a country is as I've always said, you know, for big companies, it is easier for them because they export and they understand that they need to meet these requirements and have all these certification.
Yeah.
But we have a challenge when it comes to micro enterprises because micro enterprises are either on the
Your
radar.
small businesses,
Yeah.
Small
right?
businesses.
Your taco stand, your rice and beans vendors, your
Street
on the
vendors.
street fruit shops.
All and sundry. And so that's where a lot of effort has to go into sensitizing them. There has to be systems in place to ensure that there is some way of not just sensitizing, people need to act on the information that you're going to give them. And I think that unless we have, there's only so much that the institutions can do as Dr. Figueroa said, you know, you can sensitize people and you can educate them. But really, the change has to come with the practices, and if those practices don't change, then the issues of exposure and threats to food safety issues will always be there. And I think that is our biggest problem. And we talk a lot about, and I'm going to get into trouble again, but we talk a lot about bringing the micro enterprise into the formal sector. But I think we are looking at it only to, anyways, we are trying to help them. We're trying to help them in ways like, say, to cut their costs, like, you know, giving them
But not at the risk of people's health.
giving them exemptions and so on.
Yeah.
That is all good.
Yeah.
But we have to take it beyond that. I mean, for you to get a concession and a cap for your product, that's fine. But how does the savings translate into the quality of that good at the end of the process? That is what's supposed to, you know, we cannot ignore that. And I think those are the things.
But beyond the micro enterprises, though, there is an accreditation issue here at the core too, because I can think of large-scale restaurants or even medium-scale restaurants that, you know, there's HACCP certification that's required sometimes for kitchens where people are preparing food for public consumption or sale. And I mean, you just have to think of where you last bought fast food and look the back in the kitchen.
Don't do that.
There's clearly no certification or international standards being met there to ensure proper health. Now, I'm not naive enough to believe that it is not a very costly exercise to get that level of accreditation. But is there at least a tier, perhaps, that you can move up to get a basic accreditation, followed by something higher, and then moving up until we do have the standards that, quite frankly, any citizen in any part of the world deserves?
Well, I think when it comes to accreditation is really for the agencies.
Yeah.
The agencies that are testing, that are measuring, that are inspecting, and so on. What is important is that if you take a sample from anywhere, whether you go to the restaurant you see, what we need to know as a society is that this country has testing capabilities, world-class testing capabilities. That's what we're pushing for.
Yeah.
And so with them being accredited for salmonella, at least we could say that if you go to the taco stand right now and pull a sample, or if you go to a
fried
hotel
chicken.
or fried chicken place, they can test that product for that particular scope, which is salmonella. And that is what, for us as a society, it assures us, and that you could sleep at night, that we have the capabilities to test for salmonella.
Yeah.
And that, you know, that we are growing in terms of that testing capabilities. We are nowhere near where we ought to be in terms of testing for food, because their scope is not as exhaustive as one would want it to be. But that's the reality, and that is what we're trying to do. But the accreditation part, like I said, is the agencies that have to have that competency, and it's not only for the domestic market, but as you rightly said just a short while ago, it is for, at the end of the day, if that micro enterprise graduates out of the domestic market and now is looking to export, that in-house we can test for certain things to assure that when that product hits that market, they have international traceability and recognition. Tested once, accepted anywhere.
Jose, can I be impolite and can I go back to food safety? In Belize, we have a culture where an unspoken culture of nice and nasty.
Yeah.
You know, and we're cheap. Belizeans, we look for bargains. Because the actual cost, if you look at the cultural and economic challenges of food safety, you have a chicken at one place that costs $3, but you get a lot, as opposed to going to another place and it's $20, but it's perfectly clean. I mean, if you go in and you test it, everything would be high standard. Belizeans would be packing up at 6 o'clock in front of the one that's $3. My question is, how do we bridge that gap between balancing the economic, because there's an economic cost to food safety. And actually, if I get to it, I hope to ask the question, whether there's a correlation.
There's an economic burden on the illnesses that people get.
As well.
Because that's loss of productivity. People are out of work for 1 week, 2 weeks with a terrible food poisoning bout. And the medical bills.
And the medical bills.
I wanted to know if there was a correlation between the economic instances and risks. So do developing countries have more of a food safety risk in terms of on a micro level than in developed countries? And so where does Belize fall in terms of food safety in the international scene? Basically, in layman's term, because we're poor, can we even afford
to be a developing country? Does that answer your question? We are a developing country. So
but hand washing is pretty cheap.
Yes, exactly. There's certain practices that you can do. It's not expensive.
But look at a very simple thing. The kind of cleaners that, for example, a KFC in the States would use. The cost of that as compared to some Discipline and some Pioneer in Belize.
Well, I think we all remember, as far as I know, we haven't had outbreaks associated with mortalities the way even countries like the US have had.
That's true.
It could that be a testament to how strong Crofe, how strong Belizeans, we just tough.
That's it. We're immune to it, but we have been exposed to it from since birth.
But that is science, though. The level of exposure to bacteria
you bring a tourist here and they get sick.
But it doesn't make it right.
No, it's not. No, definitely not.
So, and I think Kevin's point is valid, because even in getting to, we'd love to have the international level of food safety practices, but we're not there yet. No. We're at early stages, or first year of celebrating this. Yeah. And I know that a part of the message is looking at simple actions that the individuals can take who are preparing food, processing food, transporting food. We always look at the practices and we've always heard anecdotally that people take off their refrigerators at night to say stores, or the doors don't work properly and they're open all day, or the food is put out where the sun is hitting directly on it and there's an impact there. So there are all these little things, but at the same time too, they're kind of some easy practical things that can be done. Sure. What are those things?
Well, as you say, you can't turn off your refrigeration just for save some bucks. I
think you shouldn't be allowed to, but yeah.
But one of the things that we see a lot is they don't do proper storages as well. Yes. They have they store the product the floor with a lot of heat. The heat is sometimes. I don't know if you heard last couple of months they had some, with the social media now, everything, they take picture, they found some bugs in the rice, but that has a lot to do with storage practices, and as I said, simple thing as that they can do, but sometimes, I don't know, maybe they need more public awareness, more enforcement.
Yeah.
That's one of the things, we don't do a lot of enforcement.
Yeah.
And so
it's more education and preventative rather than going the opposite end.
Exactly. Right.
I will get in trouble again.
That's fine.
This is the right place.
We like the honesty.
No, I think that we need to get our town councils and city councils more involved in what we do.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the year, when you come for a trade license, one of the things that they need to know is whether or not they are abiding by the laws. a simple scale or the way they want the food placed out. I mean, you go into a lot of these retail outlets, there's no air conditioning in there, and you have perishable goods in there. And I think that's high risk. And I think it's high time that we get our councils involved in the work that we do for them to understand that there's risk, there's exposure to health. These issues here need to be tabled. Once upon a time, we had a 5-star scheme that we had developed along with the councils to try and let the merchants be more proactive and do their part. And that worked out for some time, but it fell through the cracks. But I think it's time that we come back to that point, because otherwise, you see, we're only seen as enforcement agencies, and I think that there's some voluntary, there's some social responsibility that comes with this. And it's not, we're strapped for resources. That's a fact. And the amount of personnel we have to go on and do market surveillance is not enough, and it's never going to be enough. But we have to be more proactive to see how we can correct it. And it has to be a community, it has to be a collaboration.
Has there ever been talks of a task force or a group approach? Ministry of Health, BAHA, even Bureau of Standards, trade license groups, all of these entities to look, and even the police, because some of these things do have penalties, to really look at how you can share the work and ensure that food safety does become a priority. Because as I said before, that gastrointestinal study, which we didn't talk about enough, shows a lot in terms of the impact of sickness on our people. And so we know that we're taking it lightly, and it's probably continuing at this end. It's life-threatening if you're older, young, and if you're immunocompromised. So is there a talk of perhaps going from a collaborative point of view?
Well, yes. We have we have a draft. One of the things that we don't have is a food safety law. We don't have a food safety act.
Wow.
All it's dispersed in the different.
Not as a subset of the Public Health Act.
We have a public health, but then it mostly deal with the different other things than food safety. Right. And so one of the things that we have done already is in collaboration with FAO, we developed a food safety bill. Food and Agriculture Organization. At that time, it was Michael DeShield was the director of food safety, and we have developed a food safety bill, an actual comprehensive food safety bill, and there it talks about the committee of the task force, right? But it's still.
Dr. DeShield, that's a long time ago.
Yes, that's in 2001,
Can I
2002.
ask my final question in terms of being a...
Is it for that?
We do have to talk about activities, so please do remember.
But being on the bad end of food poisoning very recently. There's a cultural challenge I faced, which was I faced a dilemma of whether or not I should go back to the micro-establishment and tell them, yo, I got sick here. And I battled with it for a long time because I didn't want the proprietors, who are very honest people, to say, what you want? You know, bad mouth to place. But I was able to discover that there were at least 8 other people who got ill on that same day. How do we bridge the gap between letting establishments know, listen, I'm criticizing you, yes, but it's not in a bad way. What you're doing threatens life. And so you need to adjust something. And to bridge the gap between them by their own volition, making changes to their sanitary practices, or getting the authorities to look at them in a healthy way. Because you don't want to shut down businesses, particularly that provide good services to people, but you need that balance to be safe. How does the community reach out? If I get sick, rather than say, because the Belizean approach to when you get sick eating somewhere, you know what we do? We don't go eat there again. We don't go and complain to you.
And we tell a few
people, but to actually get them to change the practices, so more people get sick. How do we bridge the gap to get people to actually honestly go to people like yourself, to people like BAHA, and say, I had a problem here. They're good people. Can you work with them? How do we bridge that gap?
Well, yeah, I sometimes wonder, because I'm not on social media, but I wonder why.
Won't get us a
sometimes-
visa, you know.
because because I feel like we talk about a lot on social media about the
Yeah.
plate of food, and we take pictures of the food that we eat every day. But something like that, I mean, we're on Facebook. I don't know if BAHA is on Facebook, but I think our society has evolved to the extent that now the communication channels has, really has changed the way people interact with one another and how they interact with agencies. I think we're no different. We're an entity, they're an entity. And I think that people need to use, or society needs to use those things for that purpose. I mean, like I said, it's not just to talk about the beach you visited and you took a picture of the food and the beer you're drinking, but I think it has to be, we have to use it, it's a tool. I think it's I mean, I'm not a proponent for it, but it's a tool now that exists that people can use. And bridging that gap starts with some of those mechanisms. I mean, you're on your phone more than you're on talking to people.
Yeah.
So I think that is one, and
Is it
it's
perhaps
just
a civic
exposure.
responsibility that we're neglecting?
Yes.
I believe
There-
so. I believe so.
There
and
needs to be reporting, because
Well,
then
yeah.
agencies can't make any intervention if we don't have the information.
we
Yeah.
don't know. We don't know. So I think that is the what needs to happen in terms of
Well, other than that, people tend to auto-medicate themselves. They don't report, and now they will treat themselves. And
Yes.
so there's no
Yes.
data.
You're speaking truth.
So-
I didn't also
Say
say
that again. Yeah. But let's because this is a wonderful conversation, and just talking to you, I realized that this task force is most important, because the questions that public health can answer. How do you get your trade license? What are the things that are checked? All these things.
Yeah.
I have questions that clearly you can't answer because that's not your direct responsibility. But what's happening in terms of the commemoration of these 2 days? Let's get your activities.
Well, tomorrow we're having a food safety seminar.
Okay.
We have invited a lot of the stakeholders, the person we work with on a daily basis. And so we have different presentations from all the ministries. We have BAHA, Bureau of Standards, Ministry of Health.
Yeah.
We invited also from the tourist sector, the tourism board. And we also invited one of the representing the consumer to give their perspective. And as well as
Who
Marish.
represents the consumer? Because we don't have a consumer
yes,
agency.
I know, but it's very
I can be their representative. Kevin can be your representative. Fresh off food board.
we need a consumer group. I think that's
But,
one of the
okay.
things. And we have also invited a representative from Mary Sharp, because we want to know how food safety helped them to be able to access the external market. So it's almost an entire day. It starts at 8 and finish around 2. So that's the activity we have planned.
Yeah.
Of course, we, as ORISA member country, we did develop a video. It's in the YouTube. And I think we share it with you guys.
Yes, yeah,
It's a Spanish, but with subtitle in English. Our group, food safety group, it's composed of all the countries of Central America, Mexico, and Dominican Republic. And we meet every year. And this year we met in February, and we decided to do this video. So we have also done that as well.
All right. And for World Accreditation Day?
well, it's a joint activity.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a joint,
That's why
exactly. It's a
Okay.
joint activity.
The
And then you get
first-
to talk about the great work that's happening
Of BAHA,
at Dr. Natalie's lab.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, thank you for coming in and being able to have this conversation with us. It's clearly something that we need to talk more openly about more often. And we appreciate you coming in.
Thank
Right?
you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, too.
We're going to go ahead and take a break. And when we come back, it's to talk about job opportunities at Transparent BPO. So stay tuned.